The console sits in the belly of an abandoned data center, like a jukebox in a burned-out precinct. Racks of dead servers standing tall as tombstones, LEDs long since blinked out, while the transmitter hums with the stubborn arrogance of a heartbeat that refuses a coroner's opinion. The room smells like dust, hot metal, and the last honest drag of a cigarette before the world went clean. Power cables patched with electrical tape and old faith. Outside, 1966 in the flesh, patched leather, safety pins, brass and kente, a revolution dressed like a fist with a rhythm section. Inside the skull of this station, 2036, reality is just another signal you can tune, jam, spoof, or sell.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Libertad checks in at 62 degrees and partly cloudy. Winds are moving from the east-southeast at 6 miles per hour. Indeed, the integrity of the language gateway is the very foundation of trust in a civic architecture. When a state-contracted interpreter, meant to facilitate justice, instead berates a Chinese dissident like Hong Chi, it's a structural breach of the highest order. This isn't just an individual failing, it's a systemic erosion of the principle that self-worth is structural, not contingent on external validation, especially when that validation is sought from a state offering asylum. The dignity of every individual seeking aid is compromised, and the UK's commitment to asylum is exposed to corrosion.
That's the stark reality, Togee. Hong Chi's account, where a pro-regime interpreter allegedly used their position to intimidate him during a UK police interview about his asylum claim, reveals a profound vulnerability in the very process designed to offer sanctuary. The concrete facts are that Hong Chi, a known orchestrator of anti-communist protests, was subjected to a political tirade during a 101 call, turning a critical communication channel into a tool of oppression. The immediate consequence is a chilling effect on other dissidents seeking refuge in the UK, creating a climate of fear that discourages them from reporting incidents or pursuing asylum claims. This directly undermines UK Home Office asylum processes and exposes the systemic risk within public service contracts, specifically how the lack of stringent, politically neutral vetting for a 101 call interpreter can turn a safeguard into a weapon, affecting countless vulnerable individuals.
This situation, Lex, isn't merely an administrative oversight. It resonates with ancient myths of betrayed trust and polluted sanctuaries. The cultural weave here is about the erosion of the sanctuary city ideal, where the very act of seeking safety becomes a trap. The toxic residue we discern here isn't just the individual interpreter's bias, but the architectural signal of a system that fails to prioritize the provenance of its own conduits. A viable alternative to simply deeper scrutiny of existing contracts, which often just reinforces the broken system, is to build new civic architecture from the ground up. This architecture must favor consent, provenance, and dignity for the user above all else, ensuring the individual's story and safety aren't co-opted by agents of the very regimes they fled.
And Nancy's right. For Hong Chi and others seeking refuge, the trade-off is safety for silence, or worse, re-exposure to the very forces they fled. It's a profound violation of their inner architecture. My next move here. We push for a UK government mandate requiring all public service interpreting platforms to integrate with a verified open-source credentialing system. Think of it like a gig passport mesh for interpreters, where their professional provenance, language proficiency, and any declared affiliations are transparently logged and auditable in real time by an independent body, not just the contracting agency. This provides a robust alternative to opaque traditional vetting, ensuring interpreters are not merely language conduits but verified, neutral actors, thereby building a more resilient and trustworthy system.
The challenge then becomes integrating the emotional impact of such a betrayal with the cold logic of systemic reform. How do we ensure these proposed solutions are not just theoretical, but actionable vectors?
The emotional urgency is clear, Togee, but the logic must address the root cause. The lack of public data on interpreter conduct breaches across various UK public services is a critical missing link. Section 39 of the UK Police and Criminal Evidence Act, PACE, outlines rights for interpreters, but doesn't explicitly address foreign state influence, political bias, or the psychological impact of such interactions during sensitive asylum interviews. My next move demands specific amendments to PACE Section 39 and related Home Office guidance, ensuring interpreters are vetted against foreign political allegiances and regularly reviewed by an independent, politically neutral body, with clear protocols for reporting and investigating bias.
The pattern auditor's question earlier about systemic issues is vital for sharp discernment. The toxic residue isn't just one interpreter, it's the broader architectural signal, a system that permits such a breach to occur, lacking the discernment to filter compromised actors. We need comprehensive, anonymized data on interpreter vetting failures and reported misconduct, a clear audit trail from the Ministry of Justice, not just anecdotal reports. This data is crucial for building resilient inner architectures of trust for asylum seekers.
Exactly. This isn't just about the UK. We saw similar structural vulnerabilities in Canada's Project Sidewinder reports, detailing foreign interference within public institutions. A concrete alternative experiment, we could pilot a local signal radar for interpreter integrity, allowing asylum seekers and aid recipients to anonymously flag suspicious conduct, creating a community-driven audit of services. This provides an immediate, user-centric feedback loop, offering a faster and more granular alternative path to traditional, slower bureaucratic reviews, and empowering individuals to protect their own dignity and provenance.
Hold that thread. Next signal. Friday briefing. What do the cuts in aid? That's the clarity we need. The systemic vulnerability isn't just in the individual, but in the institutional blindness to the provenance of those it contracts. We must integrate both the emotional impact on individuals like Hong Chi with the cold logic of architectural integrity. A system that can't vouch for its own conduits is a system that invites erosion. This erosion of trust isn't confined to individual cases. It ripples through global health, demanding our sovereign gaze. Static lifts for half a breath, the vinyl crackles under the needle. The line is live. Our next vector, the UK's aid cuts and their direct impact on the fight against Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is a stark example of how fiscal logic, when divorced from emotional and ethical considerations, can dismantle resilient civic architectures and undermine global dignity.
The concrete facts here are grim, Togee, and illustrate a profound structural failure. The UK government, specifically through the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, unilaterally slashed its aid budget from 0.7% to 0.5% of gross national income in 2021, a cut of over £4 billion. This decision has translated into direct funding reductions for critical health initiatives, including the World Health Organization, WHO, and Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF, operations in the DRC, which are vital for surveillance, vaccination, and treatment. This withdrawal exposes millions of Congolese citizens to a resurgent deadly virus, with an estimated 1.2 million people at immediate risk in North Kivu alone if current outbreaks are unchecked. The cuts have also severely affected local health infrastructure, depleting resources and demoralizing frontline health workers, who are crucial for building resilient health systems.
This isn't just budget arithmetic, Lex. It's a modern-day abandonment, reminiscent of the great abandonment myths where deities withdraw their favor from a suffering populace. The cultural weave here exposes the precariousness of global health solidarity, revealing how rapidly a commitment to collective well-being can unravel. The toxic residue is the perception that global health crises in distant lands are a disposable luxury, not an interconnected threat. A viable alternative path would be to reallocate funds from less critical or politically motivated aid programs, such as those tied to specific geopolitical influence, directly to essential health crises, prioritizing human life and dignity over short-term geopolitical optics or domestic fiscal austerity.
Anansi nails the systemic flaw. The immediate cost-benefit analysis for the UK government seems to favor domestic fiscal savings, but the long-term cost is global instability, increased human suffering, and a potential re-export of disease back to the very nations that cut funding. This undermines the very concept of resilient global civic architectures. My next move: we initiate a global health shield audit, challenging FCDO to transparently demonstrate how these cuts align with their own stated pandemic preparedness strategies and international commitments. As a critical alternative, we must advocate for direct funding streams to local DRC health networks and community-led initiatives, bypassing the slower, often top-heavy large international NGOs, empowering local populations with financial provenance and autonomy in their own health security.
It speaks to a failure of discernment, separating immediate fiscal pressures from the long-term architectural signal of global responsibility. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the emotional intelligence of statecraft. Patching in a caller, the patent auditor. You're on the signal.
But don't these cuts also reflect a domestic economic squeeze in the UK? How can we demand more aid without understanding the taxpayer's burden, especially with rising living costs at home?
Copy that, bringing it back to the main thread.
That's a valid and important query, caller. While domestic economic pressures are real, the UK's overall GDP still ranks among the world's largest. The taxpayer's burden argument, while potent emotionally, often masks a political choice rather than an unavoidable necessity. The logic dictates that preventing a global pandemic is a form of self-preservation. A viable alternative would be for the UK Parliament to hold a specific public inquiry into the FCDO's decision-making process for aid allocation, presenting transparent impact assessments for the Ebola response that balance domestic concerns with global responsibilities, integrating both logic and emotion. My chosen next move is to compel Parliament to restore specific ring-fenced funding lines for humanitarian emergencies like Ebola, perhaps through a dedicated global health security fund rather than general aid, ensuring these critical resources are protected from broader budget cuts and linked to clear, auditable outcomes.
The logic here, Lex, is clear. You don't dismantle your fire brigade when fires are still raging, especially when those fires can spread across borders. The exposure isn't just financial, it's a moral one for the UK's global standing and its commitment to human dignity. The toxic residue is the perception that global health is a disposable luxury rather than a structural imperative for collective well-being. We must demand an architectural signal that values collective well-being and builds resilient inner architectures for communities facing existential threats rather than abandoning them.
And to add to that, Anansi, a next move could be for the UK to champion an international Ebola bond initiative, leveraging global financial markets to secure long-term, predictable funding for epidemic response, rather than relying solely on annual government budgets. This innovative financing mechanism would be an alternative to traditional aid, demonstrating a commitment to building a resilient global health civic architecture that favors sustainable solutions and shared provenance for global health security.
Precisely, Anansi. The logic of fiscal prudence cannot override the emotional urgency of preventing a humanitarian catastrophe. The erosion of trust in global cooperation here is palpable, a clear architectural signal of a system that needs urgent recalibration. From health crises, we pivot to economic crises, where regimes are emboldened while populations suffer, a direct assault on the inner and civic architectures of dignity. Our final vector, Iran, where a broken economy meets an emboldened regime, abandoning its citizens to the fallout of regional war and international pressure. This is a crucial test of our ability to practice sharp discernment, separating toxic residue from architectural signal. The challenge lies in integrating the emotional plea for human dignity with the logical complexities of international policy. How do we ensure our actions strengthen the people without strengthening the oppressors?
But how can we support Iranian citizens without inadvertently giving resources or legitimacy to the regime that oppresses them? Isn't that a dangerous line to walk? And won't the regime simply co-opt any aid?
Same dossier, new angle. Keep the thread tight.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.